There we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
See some familiar faces. It's good to be back. So how many of you had the opportunity to watch the royal wedding on May 19th? So I wasn't really excited or interested. Can I actually take this off? About it. And that particular weekend, I was up at Mount Rainier at a women's retreat. And so later that morning, I walked into one of the bedrooms and I noticed a group of women that were kind of huddled together, and they had their smartphone and they were watching the royal wedding. And so then I kind of walked over and peeked, behind them, and I saw the very Reverend Michael Curry was giving the sermon. And he's African American. He's the first Episcopal African American minister, so for all of the United States. And I was really intrigued because, as you know, I went to Unity Urban Ministerial School, and for the first year I was the only white person. It's an inner city, and all of the other students were African American, and I really gained a love and appreciation for their oratory skills, their ability to give a sermon. So I was really curious about, what he would be speaking and saying to a world audience. So when I got home, I YouTubed it and I watched it, and the hairs were standing on the end of my arms, and I watched it 3 times. It was that good. So the Reverend Curry, he was speaking about love, and he actually started it off with this scripture from the Song of Solomon, Song of Songs. This book is actually banned in some Bibles for some faiths. Unfortunately, Unity has not banned it. One of my favorites. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm. For love is stronger than death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. So he started with that, and he gave some pretty interesting stories, but what I really liked and appreciated was when he started sharing some profound insights by a mystic, a Jesuit priest, and a world-famous scientist, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. Are any of you familiar with him?
Yeah.
So his insight was that fire, to a great extent, is what made our civilization possible, right? The discovery and the harnessing of fire was actually one of the greatest technological discoveries of mankind in human history. Fire made it possible to cook food, thereby averting the spread of disease. Fire made it possible for people to keep warm, so they were able to migrate to northern climates. Fire made possible the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the Industrial Revolution, right? If you drove here this morning, you did so partly because of harnessed fire. If you've ever been on an airplane, you have flown due to a controlled, slow burn of fire. So fire has made it possible for us to text, to tweet, to email each other, and to communicate. It brings us together in so many ways, right? So Reverend Curry then ended with this quote: "The day will come when, after harnessing space, the winds, the waves, and gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire." So that just really, I had goosebumps when he read that. And I had heard it before, but for some reason it just really had an impact. And I was captivated. And I had so many questions. I had more questions than answers. And Dave's laughing. I'm like, well, how is love like fire? And how could we discover it and harness it? How can we fan the flame of fire? And so for the last 2 months, I have been researching Teilhard de Chardin to find out what his understanding was about love. So, love is a raging flame that never dies. And that's something that all mystics and prophets, seers, great teachers agree upon. And I wanted to share one example for you. How many of you are familiar with Baal Shem Tov? He was born in 1698. He was a rabbi. He is a mystic from the Jewish faith. He was born on the border between the Ukraine and Poland. And so the little village that he grew up in was sometimes part of Ukraine, sometimes part of Poland. As you might recall, the Jews were very poor in that area, and his parents were the poorest of the poor. In fact, they both died by the time he was 5 years old. And so he was raised by the community. He was kind of passed around. As he got a little bit older, he loved to spend time in the woods by himself. And so he would often be wandering and just resting or walking out in the woods. And they said that one day, a mysterious man appeared, an elderly gentleman who began teaching him. And nobody had any idea who he was or where he came from. But on a regular basis, he would teach this young boy, and he did so for several years. And then, as mysteriously as he appeared, he disappeared. And at this point, the village realized that this young boy had a gift. And so they placed him with their rabbi, and he lived with that rabbi from that point on. So his real name was Israel, but he was given the name of Baal Shem Tov, but the nickname, or the name that he mostly went by, is the Besht. So he was a young person that was really filled with love. And on his 16th birthday, he claimed that the prophet Elijah visited him and actually told him that the prayers of these poor, simple people and the love and the faith which they offered these prayers really rose into the higher realms, and that angels and the power and presence, God really appreciated these prayers, and Elijah showed the Besht the results of these prayers. And so as a result, he focused not on the Torah. He didn't teach the Torah to the people, but he taught them prayer and singing because he saw the effect of it. So that was another issue that that was a problem for them. Because they were so poor, they really couldn't afford the time to study the Torah, and they didn't have the acclaimed teachers of the Torah. So they were really looked down upon by other Jews that were not as poor as they were. So the story goes that he was 16, 17, 18, and the people just really felt his love and trusted him. So he was called, whenever there was a dispute in any of the neighboring towns even, they would ask him to settle the dispute and to resolve it for them. They trusted him that much. And so his reputation started spreading. And about 3 days from their village, 3 days walk, was another rabbi who was a little bit more affluent, named Ephraim of Brody. And he was sure, this young boy, he questioned him. He was sure he must be a fraud. And he determined that he was going to show that he was a fraud. So he made the trip 3 days to come visit him. He was around him for only just a short period of time, and he was so taken by his love that right then and there on the spot, he promised him his only daughter's hand in marriage, right then and there. Unfortunately, as he was traveling home, he passed away. So he wasn't able to relay to his daughter or his wife what had happened. And so a little while later, the Best made the trip. He walked there to claim his bride. And when he showed up, he was dressed in rags. It was in the middle of winter, and he had no shoes. He didn't own a single pair of shoes. He had wrapped his feet with rags to walk through the snow. So he was a skinny, scrawny young man. He was 18 at the time. And the mother was like, not only no, but you know the word. And her brothers were like, no way. And she just, I think her name was Chana, and she could feel the love that he exuded. And she said, yes, I'll marry you. And the family said that they would disown her if she married him. And they did. So the two of them leave together, and they're married in a neighboring village. She said that in the evenings, he would tell her how he longed to be with God and to spend time with God. And so he would go into a room by himself where he would pray for hours. And sometimes he would pray all through the night, she said. But what would happen is he would start praying, and if she went into the room and kind of peeked or looked at him, he would be sweating, and if she touched his skin, it would be burning. And he called it the burning, and that was a sign that he was in a state of ecstasy, that his soul was communing with angels and with the divine. So the Best said that this love intelligence, the power of love, was like sap in a tree. And just like the limbs of the tree are the pathways through which the life-giving God love energy would flow, that this love intelligence would flow through our bodies. And I thought that was interesting because so many mystics compare the love energy to sap in a tree. And I actually looked up the Hebrew definition for the word sap, and I was amazed. It literally means burning energy and fire. So love is a fire. Love is a raging flame that endures forever. So I'd like to share with you a little bit about Teilhard de Chardin and his ideas about love. Osti's listening. As a child, he had a lot of mystical experiences, and they would occur when he was out in nature. So he says that as he was out in nature, he would just be noticing the magnificence and the beauty, and it would just wash over him, and that veil of separation would begin to diminish. How many, we've had those experiences, right? Especially in the summer in this area, on a mountain, on the water. So he had a number of mystical experiences like that. During World War I, he worked as a stretcher bearer for the war, during the war for the Army. So he was about 20, 21 during that time, and his job was to carry the wounded and the dead on a stretcher to where they could receive attention and help. And he said that he would look into the eyes of the wounded, and on numerous occasions he would be looking and he would notice this unusual light in their eyes. And it always happened just shortly before they would pass away. So he really, connected with that energy, the spirit energy. So he became a Jesuit priest for the Catholic Church, and he was also a scientist. So he was combining science with theology and coming up with some amazing ideas So he was banned by the Catholic Church, right? They told him they did not want him teaching, and his writings they hid. It actually has not been that long since they have been released. He died in 1955. They sent him to the furthest place they could where he wouldn't be influential, to China, into a remote area of China. And there he made a famous discovery. Does anybody know? He discovered Homo erectus and the Peking man. He found skulls from ancient, they call it the Peking man, and it's a very large collection. So he, like I said, his writings are now coming to the forefront, and the Catholic Church claims him. They're realizing the wisdom that was behind them. So, above anything else, he said, love is energy. It's not a feeling. I mean, you might have a feeling as a result, but love is the most powerful form of energy. And as I was thinking about that, I had this realization that there's really two different kinds of energy. So the first kind of energy that we're most familiar with is energy where to harness the energy, you have a destruction of matter, right? So this energy is freed as you actually destroy the matter, and then it can be put into service. So like little explosions of petrol produce energy to drive a car, or the destruction of atoms to produce atomic energy. And it doesn't matter if it's coal or what you're using, there's a form of destruction that takes place, and then we're capturing that energy. So just imagine for a moment if there was a source of energy that was opposite, that was actually constructive to life in all ways. And instead of explosions, there would be a blossoming out of atomic power. And it's not that difficult, right? Because like an acorn seed, that's how an acorn seed operates. When it's planted, it's actually a constructive bomb. It's the visible, so when it grows into an oak tree, that is the visible result of slow explosions or blossoming outs of energy. So love in all ways is a constructive energy. Every aspect of love builds, it uplifts, and it edifies. And Teilhard said that it was the driving force of all evolution. He said, the most powerful energy that we hold in our hands and in our heart is our ability to cherish, to value, and delight in things. To be passionately concerned, to be involved, and to be enchanted by life. To desire to release our creative potential and to make the world a better place. He said, learning to love is what our human life is all about, because that is what God is all about. So Teilhard really wanted us to make a radical shift in how we thought of love. He wanted us to think of it as an energy that we could harness and use. And he suggested that we think of it in terms of fire. So he came up with what he thought was the law of love. And I'm going to say it, and then I'll explain it. So he said, the law of love is the law of attraction, connection, complexity, consciousness. ACCC. So attraction, right? Connection, complexity, and consciousness. So the way this works is the power of love attracts things together at every level of the universe. So whether it's one of the smallest elements we know are quarks, and they're attracted together to make a proton, right? Protons and electrons are attracted together to make an atom. Atoms are attracted together, and then they make when they are attracted, they make new compounds, right? There's a chemical reaction and then a new compound is created. So, for example, table salt is what two elements are?
Sodium and chloride.
And chloride. And both of them are toxic and dangerous, harmful by themselves, right? But when they come together, they form a new entity and something that's healing for our body. It's a preservative. It tastes good. There's so many properties and so many beneficial uses. So things are attract together, they connect, they make a connection, and now he said whenever anything makes a connection, then it gets complicated. So there's some complexity, right? So I have a son who has been single for over 20 years, and he's getting married in a couple weeks. His life is going to be more complicated. So there's this complexity that enters in, and then in order to resolve that, you have to have an increase of consciousness, right? So that's why Teilhard said it's attraction, connection, complexity, and then consciousness, the law of love. All right. He says that love is creative, and he said that it must evolve. So innate in that energy is this desire that it has to evolve and become more. And you can actually find, like in relationships, if you're not increasing your love somehow and your relationship becomes stagnant, it actually can turn and become toxic, right, over time. So he said, in every case, the law of love says that love wants to expand and grow and become more. And it always is outwardly self-expressive. So it wants to express itself outside of itself in tangible ways. So the next thing that I want to share is the stages of love. So he actually developed 4 stages of love. And he said, and remember he passed away in 1955, but his opinion was that humankind, we are exploring love on the level of cave people, caveman. You know, we're using it to stay warm and cook our food, but it's like capable of so much more. And so he came up with these 4 stages, and he came up with these by watching in nature and by observing his relationship with God, with the divine, and observing human relationships to come up with this theory. And he says there's 4 stages, and so I'm going to share them, and then I'll explain it. So he says the first stage is giving gifts. The second stage is personal presence. The third stage is cooperative interaction. And then the fourth and highest stage that he came up is mutual indwelling. Okay? So giving, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So giving gifts. Say I become aware that my grandson Austin is interested in playing chess. And so I go out and I buy him a chess set and I mail it to him. I'm operating at the first stage of love, right? I'm giving gifts to Austin. The second stage is personal presence. So if I was operating at this stage of love, I would buy the chess set and I would either drive or fly to Twin Falls, Idaho, and I would personally give him this chess set. All right? The third one, cooperative interaction. So then, at this stage, I am regularly playing chess with Austin. So we're setting up regular times and we're cooperating with each other and we're regularly playing chess together. The fourth level is mutual indwelling. So this is the level, if I'm operating at this level, where not only are we playing chess together, but I am disclosing and sharing with Austin my most secretive, deepest strategies for winning. Right? And Austin is sharing with me his deepest, most secret strategies for winning. So we're sharing those. That's mutual indwelling. So that's a simple example. Another example, I've noticed in our area, there's really an increasing problem with homelessness. I don't know if you see that out here. We have a little park in our neighborhood. We actually had homeless people sleeping in this park, just a block from our home, which was quite surprising. So at the first stage of love, Dave and I would get out our checkbook and we would write a check to a local organization to help with homelessness. So that's giving gift. The second stage of love, we would actually show up and help, like at a soup kitchen, and we would help prepare meals. Or we would fix something in our home and then go take it. Or we might bring blankets, but we would actually be interacting with the homeless community. The third stage of love, cooperative interaction, would be, we would really be getting to know these people and interacting on a more profound level. So for example, my son, Matt, when he was in high school, he would pick up homeless people that he would see, and he would take them to the Wendy's, and he would buy them a meal, and he would listen to them, and he would hear their story, he would share his story. I remember times when I would drive with him, and he would point them out and say, oh, that's Charlie over there. This and this, that's what happened to Charlie. So he knew their stories, and on one occasion, he brought one home for dinner. And I said, Matt, you can take them out, but you cannot bring them home with you. I have this rule. So taking them out, that would be cooperative. The mutual indwelling is where we actually would go sleep with them and camp out with them, or we would invite them to live with us in our home. And I had that rule, and I actually broke it myself. On one occasion, a number of years ago, I met a homeless woman who had a job. She was escaping an abusive relationship, and she was just living in a motel, and she was pregnant. And so I actually just felt compelled right then and there to have her get her suitcases, and I brought her home, and she lived with us for 6 months so she could save to prepare for her baby. So that would be an example of mutual indwelling. And Jesus taught in the book of John, God is love, and he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in God, and God in him or her. So developing that close love relationship and being aware of the power and presence of God, and allowing that to dwell within you. We know that we are dwelling in God, and God is dwelling in us. And that would be that fourth level of mutual indwelling. So those 4 stages again were giving gifts, personal presence, cooperative interaction, and mutual indwelling. So in conclusion, I just want to express the truth that no matter what stage of love we're operating from, and it varies, depending on the circumstance, it doesn't matter whatever stage we are operating from, we are known and loved intimately. Every whit of us. In fact, the hairs on our head are numbered, they're counted, they're known to this power and presence, God. So each one of us, each one of you, is an irreducibly unique expression of the love intelligence, the beauty intelligence that creates and sustains all of life. You are an irreducibly unique expression, a constellation, really, or a configuration of love energy that lives in you as you and through you. And we each have a God-given or a purpose that has been engraved on the very fleshy tablet of our heart. In fact, it's engraved on and encoded on every cell of our being in the DNA. And that is to express love, to allow love to move us so that we are using that energy to change the world, to change ourselves, and to change, the scriptures say, heaven and earth. So we each have a purpose, and that is to express that love, and in the process, evolution takes place. And who knows, maybe someday we will evolve into Homo amore universalis, a new level of being that is capable of harnessing love to an even greater extent. So, co-creating through our own embodied lives, bringing divine love more fully into every aspect of our life and into the world, the planet, that is our purpose. And it might take a little bit of time. At the very least, it is probably going to take the rest of our life, right? The day will come when, after harnessing space, the winds, tides, and gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, mankind will have discovered fire. And we will make of this old world a new earth and a new heaven. And so it is. Amen.
My legs are short, so now my knees slope down that way. So I'm on my toes.
Can we do a meditation song? We just go right into meditation? Okay. I'd just like to invite you to prepare for a time of meditation so we can allow this idea to really permeate our entire being. So I invite you just to relax, possibly, sit up a little bit straighter, put your feet flat in front of you, and just begin to notice your breath. Allow your attention to move from your mind, from your head, into your heart, your chest area. I invite you to even put your hand on your heart, if you'd like. And know that as our awareness drops and settles into our heart area, love is duty-bound to open and expand this area. I am aware. I am aware of love. I am aware of the presence of love. Let God as love be known in me now. I trust in this love, and I trust in my life that as I tune in, as I tap in to my true nature, to my true self as an experience, as an expression of this love, the love within me is magnified and multiplied. That which is not love is released from my experience, released from my awareness. My body, my being, my heart, and my mind are in unison, are working together, anchored in love, anchored in the love experience. Right here and right now, I call forth the power of harmony, the presence, the field of infinite possibilities that I step into. I open my mind and all of my relationships to divine love. So I cease worry. I cease concern. I am aware of abundant love. If there is anything to forgive, if there is any fear to release, if there is any sadness within my being or within my mind, known or unknown to me, I simply invite in this love. I lift it all up to love. I show up in love. I show up in love. May my words, my thoughts, my expressions be ever unfolding according to beauty, in perfect alignment with peace and wisdom. I am saturated in love. I cannot separate myself from this love. As I tune into that truth, I become a match for love. I have all it takes to create, to sustain, to maintain, to magnify healthy relationships, holy communications, satisfying peace. My heart responds to this knowing. I follow the guidance and wisdom given to me, known through me. And I begin to dance my dance freely. I begin to sing my song. I begin to really, deeply, truly nourish myself and to know myself as love. And as I do, I attract more love into my life. I focus on giving of this love and this light that is in me. So if my mind gives into temptation of thinking that I need to have, that I need to get, of not understanding divine timing, I simply breathe into patience. I breathe into love. And I remember that this love is active and present in my life, continually showing me, growing me, calling me to be more and more love, to see more love. step into giving freely, completely, my whole being, my full life force, into the power and into the presence of love, the presence I was born from, the presence I exist from. And I meditate upon this presence within this sacred sanctuary inside, within the divine flow of love, in the silence. So I invite you to bring your awareness back into this room, into this space, and to allow this energy of love to reconfigure the energy patterns of your being, and know that you are this love. And when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and to smile. Welcome back. So I invite you to turn to your neighbor and let them know how much you love them.